So my name's Tracy Doulis, and I am a physical therapist. And I actually work in Northshore School District as a physical therapist. So I get to work with students who have special needs. And I first started off wanting to be a physical therapist because when I was 5, I had a cousin who was born with cerebral palsy, which is a condition where your brain can't tell your muscles how to function right. And so sometimes you can't talk or walk. So she's in a wheelchair, and she uses a communication device or kind of a computer to talk. And I would always go to physical therapy kind of sessions with her and see how the physical therapist worked with her and helped her. So I knew from like when I was 10 or so that I wanted to be a physical therapist. And I wanted to work with kids, and still is the case. I like to work with kids. I don't really like to work with adults. Adults can be pretty whiny. They're not as strong as kids. Kids like to work hard and get better. Adults, sometimes that is not the case. So I love working with kids. So when I was learning how to be a physical therapist, I also went and did some internships, where it's kind of where when you're in college, you learn how to do the job. So I worked in a children's hospital, and I worked in a school, and I also worked in an adult outpatient clinic, which is like kind of a doctor's office, but for physical therapy. And I also did a little bit at a nursing home. So working with seniors who maybe have had a stroke or something and need to learn how to use their muscles again. And then I kind of went straight to the schools, and I work with kindergartners all the way up to seniors. Since I'm in North Shore, I work at Woodinville High School. I work at Skyview Middle School. I work at Woodin, and I work at Bear Creek. But I've done a lot of other schools because I've been here for about 7 years. And before that, I was in Bellevue School District. Since I have my summers off in my past, before I had children, I also worked at a children's private clinic. So I was still working with kids, but in a clinic. And then I also worked at some nursing homes. And then I also did a little bit, I haven't told any other group this, but I also worked kind of for a nursing company where I would go into people's homes. If they couldn't get out of their house, I would go to their homes and do physical therapy with them. So that one had a lot of paperwork. I was staying up like till 2 a.m. just trying to do my paperwork. So I ended up not liking that job as much. So there are different kind of aspects of your job that you might not like, things that you might like, or different areas that you might see that you like. Let's see here. I went to college at the University of Washington, and I did my undergraduate degree or my bachelor's degree in psychology. And then I went on to get my master's. So 2 more years, so a total of 6.5 years to get my master's in physical therapy. Now, if you want to be a physical therapist, you have to get your doctorate degree. So people call you doctor. And but in reality, that's only like 3 years compared to 2.5. So you only go about 6 more months to get your doctorate than what I had to do. There's different places that you can work. Like I said, you can work in a hospital, clinics. I have friends that travel around, so they might work for a hospital in Hawaii for a few months and then may move to another state or even another country to do physical therapy. So you could travel and do physical therapy. I think that's it for now. I'm sure we'll get questions that I can answer. So Gail, go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Tracy. So my name is Gail Turner, and I'm a principal scientist at Bristol Myers Squibb. which is a pharmaceutical, it's a multinational pharmaceutical company. So we have, offices all over the country and all over the world. And we make therapies for all kinds of different conditions like cancer, autoimmunity, cardiovascular disease, fibrotic diseases. Just like we're really broad reaching company, I guess, in that aspect. I specifically work in the oncology field, which is cancer, on a new type of cancer therapy called immunotherapy, which instead of like traditional cancer therapies that I'm sure you all are familiar with, like chemotherapy or radiation therapy, which non-specifically target rapidly dividing cells. What we do is we try to train your immune system, which is what your body uses to fight off different cancer or different viruses or bacteria. We train your immune system to be able to go throughout your body and kill cancer cells. And specifically, at our site here in Seattle, we work on a specialized form of immunotherapy called cell therapy, where we take a patient's own immune cells, their own T cells, and we give them the ability to see certain proteins on the surface of cancer cells. And then we expand those immune cells and we infuse them back into the patient. And then those cells, sorry, I have another meeting popping up. And then those cells, when they're in the patient's body, they can go and travel throughout the body and kill any cancer cells that they find. And so I work in discovery or kind of the preclinical space, and this is where we think up the different therapies and we make them and then we test them out to make sure they're doing the things that we think that they can do. And we make sure they're safe and all those things. And then after we're done with them, then they go into patients for the first time. So that's kind of like the area specifically that I work in. So for this type of work, I have a PhD, so a doctorate degree. And kind of my journey through school was after high school, I went to a community college and I did 2 years there. And then I transferred I'm from California, so I transferred to a school in the UC system called UC San Diego, where I got a degree in cell and molecular biology. And then while I was there taking classes for that degree, I took an immunology class and I just really fell in love with immunology. I thought it was so interesting. And so I ended up getting accepted into a PhD immunology program at UC Davis, which is just another university in the California UC system. And then when you're getting your PhD, you kind of you pick a lab that you work in and you kind of specialize in that area. And so I picked a lab that was working in cancer immunotherapy, which while I was doing my research for my degree, it started to kind of take off in patients, and patients were seeing success with kind of like the first types of immunotherapy. And so basically, as I was finishing up my degree, there were a lot of job opportunities in the private sector and industry looking for people kind of with a similar skill set that I was just trained for. So I was able to transition into kind of the biotech space. And that's where I've been ever since. So it's kind of a good kind of summary of my journey and how I got to where I am today.
I have a question. The question was, how has my job changed with COVID? And what does my kind of day look like? I think pre-COVID. So before COVID, right, I would go to kids' class, or they would come to my therapy room and we'd do therapy, or I would even go into the PE and help kids participate in PE. I don't know if I said this before, but I think I work with like kids to throw and catch a ball or jump or run or I'll help kids walk or sit up or hold their head up. So I work with a variety of, kids' needs. So now I have to do all that on Zoom, and they're in their home. So the hard part about that is sometimes I would, it's kind of a hands-on thing. So I would need to hold a student up or work with their body to make sure that they are moving their body in the right way. And I can't do that now. So I work closely with their parents or a caregiver to try and train the caregiver on how to help their child or their student. So that can be a little bit tricky. But I've really gotten to work closely with the families, so that's been really neat. Another question I got was kind of what's the social aspect of being a PT? And so that's actually a really great question. In order to motivate students or adults to kind of do something that's really hard or really difficult, you have to build a relationship with them. So it's really important for me to get to know a student and know the things they like, things that they, what interests them. So in order to catch a ball, I might incorporate, I don't know, Pokemon or Minecraft or Fortnite into the activity to really motivate kids to do something that's really hard for them. And they have to trust me because I might push them to do things that are challenging. So, they have to know that I'm going to keep them safe, even though I might have them do something that's hard or risky, right? When you were learning to walk as a baby, you would fall down a lot. So when I am teaching a student how to walk, you know what? They might fall down. So they have to know that I'm going to do my best to keep them as safe as possible. So that's kind of like my day and what I do.
I can talk to, I guess, how my work day has changed, I guess, with COVID. So what my day to day, I guess, pre-COVID wasn't very it was pretty variable because you plan out these kind of longer term experiments, or you're working in these kind of large groups to kind of think about new things to try, or to kind of navigate a particular therapy through the drug pipeline of kind of like what things do we need to validate this particular drug that we're working on. So it's really kind of variable from day to day. But since COVID, because we've had to really pare down when we can be on site in person, that means that like on the experiment side of things, we've had to cut back on like in-person physical experiments. So initially we weren't really allowed to do many experiments at all. And then, as the situation has improved, they are letting, more and more scientists kind of back into the lab space. And so we're able to start to kind of ramp up our ability to do those experiments again. But me in particular, because I'm a little more, have a little more seniority, I've been spending a lot more time kind of in meetings and doing like more data analysis that I can do kind of on my computer from home, and don't have to come in as often. Whereas some of the more junior scientists are the ones that are mainly in the lab doing research. So that's kind of how our time kind of has changed a little bit. I've got a question that says, what do you mean you're a principal scientist? So with it's just kind of like the level of scientist that you are kind of in the company. It's just like a more kind of senior title. So like if you were to just enter a company as a like with your PhD, usually you enter kind of just at a regular scientist level, and then you might get promoted to senior scientist and then principal scientist and those types of things. So because I'm a principal scientist, it just means that I can manage kind of other people with more junior scientist titles than I have. So I can manage like entry level PhD people or people that have been working for a little bit in the company as a scientist, and aren't entry level anymore, but maybe aren't necessarily as senior as I am.
I also got a question, do I work with students with broken bones or more with students with special needs? And I actually work with students with special needs. So I don't work with students who have like a temporary injury. So, if they have like a sports injury or broke their arm or broke their leg, that would be kind of like a temporary injury, right? They're going to get better. So I don't work with those types of students. That you would go to a clinic probably to work with a physical therapist, but other therapists do work with students like that. So
I have a question. What was the biggest surprise for you when you entered your field? Like what was the most did you have any like preconceived notions about what your job would be like, and then turned out to be a little different than you were anticipating?
I would say, so I've worked kind of with a scientist, you can kind of be in more of an academic side, which means you kind of continue working in a university setting, or you can kind of move into an industry setting where you're working for like a pharma company or a biotech company. There's other options too, but those are the primary kind of sites which people work. And there's this kind of funny bias for people that stay in the academic setting where they say that if you go over to industry, you tend to make more money, but then you like lose the ability to be like creative and kind of pursue things that are interesting to you and those types of things, because you're working now for a company that has goals of treating patients, but there is also like a financial interest because it's a company that at the end of the day is making a profit. And so it's always kind of this misconception that you're just going to be kind of part of an assembly line, not really doing kind of as interesting stuff. And I'll say it's been like completely the opposite experience since I've been in a company, particularly working kind of on the R&D end of things, that we are doing like I feel like amazingly creative stuff. It's just such an interesting time to be in science because our capabilities have come so far just in the past like decade, and the things that we're able to do now are really are so interesting, and they're actually really expensive too. And it's actually really challenging to do some of these things like the right way in an academic setting because you don't have access to as much money. But because now that we have more kind of financial support because we're part of a large company, that we're able to really explore some of these things that are kind of science fiction-y that that are really challenging to do in academic things. So I'd say I almost had like the opposite experience, and so that's kind of something that come along. And then I got a question that says, do you see DNA and stuff? So we do, you don't usually see DNA, it's really small. But we do a lot of like manipulation of DNA, and that's the way that we like take the patient's immune cells and give them the ability to see proteins on cancer cells. We make a virus that can infect those cancer cells and insert the DNA necessary to make the protein that recognizes the protein on the cancer cell. So we do a lot of like DNA manipulations. We do a lot of sequencing of the DNA to look for changes in the cancer cells that we can then use those changes to target our immune cells with, and those types of things. But it's really funny whenever you're like watching TV and you see something for science, there's always like a researcher staring at a screen of like A's and T's and C's and G's, which is supposed to be like DNA, like the genetic code, and they're looking at it like they can read it and see what it's saying, but that's really not what anybody can do. And it's just something funny that you kind of see the imaging in public. So anyways, yeah.
And Tracy, anything to wrap up with?
Yes, I would say surprising to me. I always thought physical therapy was going to be like, I'm just working with kids or people and doing stuff. Guys, I do a lot of writing. You know, those persuasive writing pieces that you have to do. I have to persuade insurance companies to pay for my services, or to, you know, persuade an insurance company to buy a piece of equipment for a student or a patient. So I do write a lot more than I thought I would.
As a teacher who does a lot of argumentative writing, I love to hear that. All right. Thank you, speakers, and thank you, students, for your awesome questions. And this concludes Career Day. You are free to resume your regularly scheduled Wednesday activities.